Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Grossman's Country Life. On today's video, we're going to be building this tall, tapered cedar fence picket planter, kind of an entryway planter that I think turned out great and hopefully will sell well. I'm going to find out about that part of it. But I have about $30 in the planter box itself. That's with the cedar fence pickets, the paint, and the brad nails, and then another $15 in the plastic pot that this fern is sitting in. So for about $45, you can build these, and I believe they'll sell for around $100. We'll find out, but it looks great. It turned out great, and it was a very, very simple build. Nothing complicated about it. Some mitered cuts, but other than that, it's nothing that you can't knock out probably in a few hours' time. So with that, let's jump right into the build. Now to kick off this project, we head over to the table saw to rip the legs for the planter. You'll need 2 of your 6 fence pickets, and we're going to rip 2 2-inch strips of the full length of the picket and 2 1.5-inch strips. And once you've done that, you can just set what's left aside. You'll need those later when we kind of finish trimming this thing out. But once you have your legs ripped, it's time to head over to the miter saw, and we're going to cut those legs to length. Now before you make any cuts, you'll want to set the saw to a 5-degree miter and then make your initial cut on the leg and then move down 28.5 inches and make your other cut. So the 5-degree miter is the same direction on both ends, so those cuts should be parallel to one another. Then you'll want to repeat that on both the 2-inch and the 1.5-inch strips until you have 4 2-inch legs and 4 1.5-inch legs, and you'll see why you need all that shortly. Now we head over to the planer to smooth these out a little. And look, this step's completely optional, but if you don't have a planer, you could just simply sand these legs down, and I would recommend doing that, and make sure you do it on both sides. And the reason I say both sides is because you really won't know until you start assembling this thing which way that leg is going to be turned on the finished product, because you got to turn it so the mitered cut is pointed in the right direction. So I would go ahead and sand both sides of each leg. And then in my case, we finish out the legs with a few coats of black Rust-Oleum spray paint. And of course, you don't have to paint them at all if you just prefer a uniform cedar look. I've just really been wanting to try a cedar planter box with black trim, because I think that black trim really makes that cedar pop. So that's what I wanted to do with this one. Now with the legs done, it's time to move on to our sides, and we'll make these out of the remaining 4 pickets, and they'll be the full width of the picket. Now, I didn't do it for this one, but I should have ripped all my pickets down to a uniform size, because even though they're sold as 5.5 inches wide, that's not always the case. I've had some that were a full 6 inches. I've had some that were 5 3/8. And that can throw your entire box out of alignment if just one board ends up being a little narrower or a little wider than the others. So I would recommend ripping these down to measure them all, whatever your narrowest board is. If it's 5.5, rip them all to 5.5. They may all be the same already, but I would definitely at least measure before you start this process. But with your miter saw still set to 5 degrees, make that first cut for your top board. And then you're going to want to flip the board over to make the second cut, because you want these cuts to be opposite of one another to where it forms a trapezoid shaped board. And I'll put the exact dimensions that I used in a cut list in the description, but you can tailor this to whatever size pot you plan to use in the top of this thing. For mine, I went with a 15-inch width on these first boards on the long side, but I should have gone with 16 inches, and you'll see why when we get near the end of the build. And another thing to note, you're building 4 sides for this, obviously, but 2 sides are going to be identical, and then the other 2 sides will actually be an inch shorter overall, and you'll see why when we assemble it. But as I go through here and make my initial side, I'm going to cut 2 of each board to make what I'll call sides A and C. And then when you're done with that, you'll make sides B and D, again, an inch shorter. All the boards will end up being an inch shorter. And then what you'll do, again, is you'll start with your top board, and once it's cut, measure the bottom or the shorter side, and of course that's going to be the top measurement for your next board down. That way they meet up perfectly, and you'll just continue to do that all the way down the side until you've cut your 5 boards for each side. Again, each one will be progressively smaller, about an inch smaller, but that's not exact. I would just measure, cut your top board, measure the bottom of that board, and that'll be the measurement for the top of your next board. Hopefully that's clear, but once those all were cut, I went ahead and ran them through the planer as well, just to get a nice smooth finish. All right, guys, so at this point, we have most of what we need to put this thing together. We have our 8 leg pieces and all the panels for all 4 sides of our planter. And now the reason we have 8 leg pieces for 4 legs is these will go together to form a corner on each leg like that. And the reason you have a 2-inch piece and an 1.5 inches is because when you put these together like this, it's going to give, you're going to have a 2-inch wide trim no matter which side you're looking at. Whether you're looking at this side that's a full 2 inches, or you're looking at this side that's an 1.5 inches button up against a 1/2 inch thick the other side. So it forms a 2-inch look as well, and that's the reason why you have the 2 different size leg pieces. And then you'll see why we have the 2 full width sides and the 2 that are an inch narrower. You'll see why those are an inch narrower once we start the assembly process, which we're going to get into right now. So let's get to putting this thing together. So we're going to start with our 2 full width sides, which will attach to the narrow leg pieces. And again, you'll see why this works the way it does here as we start putting this thing together. But the main thing we need to pay attention to is the angles on our legs, because those 5-inch or 5-degree cuts are pretty subtle. So you really got to pay attention to make sure you have them turned the right way to where they'll be flat to the ground where they're sitting, and they angle out the right way, the correct way. All right, let's get the glue out here. Get started. And as always, for a project that's going to go outdoors, I'm using Titebond 3, the waterproof glue, and I'm going to be using 3/4 inch 18 gauge brads because I would normally use 1 inch. What we got going on here now? Now I would normally use 1 inch, but since I planed these down, there's only 1 inch thickness there. I didn't want it shooting through. And of course I'm shooting these through the back just so I don't have nail holes on the visible part of the planter. I got a lot of squeeze out there I'm going to have to take care of here in just a second. All right, now we're just going to go see down the line here, put these in the order. All right, now we just repeat the same exact process for the other side. All right, once we have our two sides with the smaller rails, what we're going to do is attach the larger rails. Let's see. Yeah. Onto the side like so. Yeah. And we'll do that, of course, on each side. And again, make sure you're orienting those 5-degree angles the correct way. There we go. And again, do the same thing to the other side. Now with sides A and C complete, it was time to fill in the panels for sides B and D. So I set the two finished sides on their side, roughly the correct distance apart, and ran a bead of glue down the inside of each leg. Then one by one, I laid the panels in place, made sure that the existing sides were tight against the edge of those panels, and then tacked them down with the brad nailer. Then it was time to flip it over and do the other side when this happened. Oh, shit. You gotta be freaking kidding me. Oh my gosh. Yeah, not good. In hindsight, I should have used longer brad nails when I nailed the two leg pieces together just to give that a little more strength. But I was able to get those two pieces back in place and get it set until that glue dries good, and then I shouldn't have any issues with it going forward. So with that crisis averted, it was time to glue and nail the boards on the remaining side, which was a bit of a tight fit down there near the bottom, but I was able to get it all nailed together. Then all that was left to do was clamp it up and give the glue time to do its thing. Well, all right, guys, just took the clamps off of it, wiped it down a little bit. It looks great, but we already have a couple problems. Nothing unusual, huh? But first of all, it's got a rock to it. So one of these two legs is a little long. I'm gonna have to do some sanding on it and get that leveled out a bit. That's not too big of a deal. Another issue, this is a little bigger deal. This is the pot that I kind of built this thing around, and right now it kind of sits on top, which was not the intention. The intention was to build a little shelf down in here that this will actually sit inside of this, because we still gotta build the lip around this thing. So there's two, and that was a miscalculation on my part. The sides here with the narrower strips, I made it 15 inches because this was about 14 and a half. But what I didn't account for was that these sideboards, which total about an inch, take up part of that 15 inches. So it's about 14 inches. Which is why it don't sit down in there like it's supposed to. So two ways we could go here. I could put this lip on, set it in just a little bit to where this thing sits snugly on top of that. That would work, but I'm not sure I would like the look of that. I don't know. I mean, that might be all right. The other thing I could do is just trim the lip off of this container and go ahead and build the shelf where it'll sit down in there. And honestly, man, I'm still undecided at this point. Just not sure I like the looks of it sitting on top of that lip. But the lip's going to be black. This is black, so it wouldn't, I mean, I don't think it would like stick out. I may end up doing that. But anyway, we got to trim the legs for sure. And I still want to put some trim pieces like across the top here, a black trim piece. I waited because I want it all assembled before I get those measurements and make those cuts. And probably a bottom trim piece as well. And then we'll have to cut our top. I felt like there was one more. Oh, the other little boo-boo, which just ain't a big deal, but if you look closely, the two sides are a little bit longer than the other two sides. And that's because I've said this before on some of these videos, and I didn't kind of heed my own warning. These fence pickets, cedar fence pickets, are not an exact width. If you look at them, they're not always the same exact width. And so it's best to always run them through, kind of rip them on the table saw all to the same width, whatever that, whether that's 5.5 or 5.25. But you want them uniform. And in my case, I didn't do that. I didn't measure them. And obviously one of them was or maybe more than one, was a touch wider than the others. So I ended up with a couple sides just a little bit longer than the other. Not much, not a big deal. And when I slap that bottom trim piece on, I can kind of correct that. So it's not too much of an issue, but something to think about as you're building these or any kind of fence picket project is make sure you're either measuring the width of those pickets or you're ripping them all to a uniform width. Otherwise, you may end up off on some of your dimensions. So keep that in mind. But otherwise, I think we're good. I'm going to start cutting these trim pieces. I'll have to paint those, so that'll be a process. But we'll get those put on. We'll get the top put on. And I think I am going to make it to where this just sits on top. This is a prototype. This is my first attempt at these. And I can kind of take what I learned from this one and improve the ones moving forward. But that's the plan. Let's get started. Let's get this thing finished out. So with the box assembled now, it was time to finish trimming this thing out. And I wanted some black trim at the top and bottom of each side. So I went ahead and measured for that. And using the partial board that was left from when I ripped the legs, I cut some 1 3/4 inch trim strips to use for these. And just like everything else on the box, these trim pieces get 5-degree miters on each end. Once I had all those cut, I then set my miter saw to 45 degrees and cut 4 17-inch strips for the top. And when I say 17 inches, I mean from long tip to long tip. And when you cut these, make sure after you make your initial cut on one end, you flip the board over before making your second cut, so those 45-degree angles are opposite of one another. Because these boards are essentially going to form a frame around the top. Now, if you want to keep this simple, you could just skip those 45-degree miters and just use butt joints on the top. I know a lot of guys do that on these cedar projects because mitered cuts can tend to pull apart over time as those boards weather. But I just like the look of mitered corners, and with these being painted, they shouldn't weather as bad. And so I'm gonna go with mitered on mine. But all this trim then gets painted black, and then it's time to install it once again using Type Bond 3 glue and some 3/4 inch brad nails. Then it's on to assembling the top. And rather than nailing these individual boards onto the box, I like to assemble the top boards to each other first to form that kind of frame. And then once you have that assembled, you can glue and tack it to the box itself. Before we attach the top though, I want to go ahead and get the box leveled out by sanding the feet until I get that wobble to stop. Then I hit the top with the sander just to knock down a few high spots before we go ahead and tack down that top that we built in the previous step. And with that, we are ready to put the finishing touches on this thing. Well, all right, guys, we got the planter in pretty good shape here. I probably will finish it out with some spar urethane, some water-based spar urethane. But I've actually ordered a spray gun and I'm waiting on that to come in. I'm not going to do any more paint brushing. I'm going to use that spray gun. So that'll be a different project, different video. I might do a review on the spray gun or something. But for now, we're going to finish this thing off by getting our fern planted in the pot and get this thing set in front of the house so we can kind of get a final look at how it's going to look in the entryway to the house. And I'll be able to tell if one is going to be sufficient or if I'm going to need two of these things to really kind of make it look right. And so I've already got a little potting soil in here as a base, and we'll get this thing set in place. Dig it out just a little here. That's pretty good. And then it's just a matter of filling in. Probably be easier if I just set this up here. Toss that over into the trash. I think we might need, maybe. Let's see how this looks. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this build, and really happy with how it turned out. I really like the look of this thing. It's a little different than the typical fence picket planters that you see all over YouTube and Facebook. I like that tapered design. I like the taller profile, and I really like that black trim on that natural, with the natural cedar panels. I think that really pops and just gives it a nice kind of a classy touch. And so I'm going to take some pictures of this, throw it on Facebook, see how it does. I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But I'd be curious to hear in the comments below if this is one that you've seen a lot of in your area. Are you seeing people sell this style on Facebook Marketplace? If so, how's it doing? Or have you built one like this? Just let me know in the comments below. I'll be curious because I haven't seen a whole lot of them in my area, but we'll see how it goes once I get them posted. But if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and little notification bell. I got a lot more builds coming your way. And as always, guys, I'll see you on the next video.